This incident happened to me last year on Halloween. My little brother and I were home alone since our parents had gone out to a Halloween party. They had tasked us with handing out candy to the trick-or-treaters. This bummed my brother and I out because we had made plans to go trick-or-treating with a few friends. Our parents told us that we were too old to still be trick-or-treating and that we could instead invite our friends over to the house and hang out there. My friends declined my invitation to come over because they still wanted to go out trick-or-treating. So that left me home alone with my brother handing out candy. A lot of people stopped by our house and by 10 PM almost all candy was gone. My brother and I decided that we'd eat the rest. We were sitting on the couch watching a scary movie, stuffing ourselves with candy, and then there was a knock at the door. I stormed off of the sofa, wondering who the fuck could be knocking at our door at this hour. I assumed that it was just some late night trick-or-treaters. Even if that was the case, I had turned the porch light and Halloween decorations off, which should have been a dead giveaway that we weren't giving out any more candy or that we weren't home. So I assumed it was just my parents. Being cautious, I looked through the peephole and saw a suspicious man standing on our front porch. He was wearing a black hoodie with the hood over his head, which made it difficult to see his face. The only detail I could spot was that he had a beard and dry, crusty lips. There was no way that this guy was a trick-or-treater, because he wasn't wearing a costume, and was far too old to be trick-or-treating alone. His hands were stuffed in his front pockets of his hoodie, and he also looked very thin. Every single red flag went off in my head about this guy. There was no way in hell I was going to open the door. Still looking through the peephole, I watched as he knocked on the door again. He seemed desperate for us to open up, and was shaking a bit. It wasn't cold outside, definitely not cold enough for someone to be trembling. He was giving me a bad vibe, and I wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible. "We're out of candy," I shouted to him. I watched as a smile spread across his face. It wasn't a friendly smile either.
"Are you alone in there?"
the man asked, almost in a mocking voice. His voice was raspy and dry. "Should I call the police?" my little brother asked me, quietly, gripping his cell phone. The man let out a low grumble and said,
"Sounds like you're not alone in there."
I continued to watch him through the peephole. His hands were still wedged tightly in his pocket and he was still shaking a bit. I began to wonder if he was armed. I decided to take action and spoke to him in the most intimidating voice I could. "Get the fuck away from my house or I'll call the police," I shouted. His smile faded and he bared his teeth. His teeth were piss yellow and I concluded that he was probably some homeless crackhead. He had a look of fury plastered on his face. Fortunately, he left without trying to break in, probably because he knew I wasn't fucking around. I didn't stop watching him through the peephole though, until I saw him completely off of our property. My brother and I breathed a sigh of relief and decided not to call the police. We were a bit paranoid after this and watched TV until our parents came home. We didn't tell them about the man, since he hadn't really tried to harm us. Now when I think back to this, I wish we'd called the police, because maybe we would have been able to prevent a murder. You see, the next day we found out that the elderly woman who lived a few houses down from us had been brutally murdered. Our neighbour had found her lying on the front porch, covered in blood. She'd been stabbed multiple times in the chest and neck. My brother and I immediately knew who had done it, and we told the police what we saw. They couldn't do much from the information we had given them, since we hadn't really seen many details of his face. They went on a hunt for the man, but to my knowledge, never caught him. I blame myself for that poor lady's murder, because I could have prevented it from happening just by calling the police. I think the most disturbing thing of all of this is the fact that he didn't take anything from the old lady's house. Her home was left untouched, but he could have gone in and taken what he wanted since the door was wide open. This means all he wanted to do was kill. That was his only intention. He didn't want money or jewellery. He only had the urge to murder. So, to the creepy crackhead Halloween slasher, let's not meet.